It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker.
Yo, man. Oh, Miss Rusty. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the podcast, the Public Access Podcast, here on the Quantum Global Broadcasting Network, QGBN. I'm your host, Rusty Diamond. Check out other shows on the network, like When the Gloves Come Off, the Thinking Man's Pro Wrestling Podcast. This is It with Lizzie and Saved by the Ben. Show is brought to you by Fred Ben Savage as Fuck, Stoner Eats Productions, Hardcore Entertainment, Hypnosis is Great, and Sock 'em Up. And you check out sockemup.org. That's where people need socks. People need socks. That's what people are asking for, and people are not getting socks. So that's what Sock 'em Up does. SOCKEMUP.org. Check out my website, rustydiamond.net. I don't need to spell it out, I don't think. So, you guys, thanks for being here. Like, subscribe, share, download, do all that stuff. You're already here. It won't be on YouTube for a couple weeks because YouTube doesn't want me to talk about certain things. So they ban me from uploading stuff for 2 weeks. So it's going to be on Rumble. And if you don't want to see my face, you go over and you listen anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can check out the show and leave a message, man. You can check out. I'll play it on the phone or on the show. It goes right to my phone. I'll play it on air. 503-974-6420. Just leave me a message, and maybe you don't like leaving messages and you think
Messages? We don't leave no stinking messages.
but I need messages, so send me messages, send me messages. So thank you everyone for being here. I'm gonna bring my special guest right here, right now. Right here, right now, we have Luna Rey Hall. How you doing?
Good. I am doing well. How are you?
Not too shabby. It's it's not a bad day today. Just
It's good.
yeah, going through the stuff and getting to meet new people. So it works out kind of all right for me.
Definitely.
And yeah, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it. So I don't know why.
guess that's
If I hated doing this, I wouldn't be wasting my time doing this. So so let's see. So you're in the writing game because I got your information from Mickey, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I'm an author. I have 3 books. My most recent is The Patient Routine. It's a horror novella about a non-binary character who suffers from hypochondria or health anxiety, depending on what definition you look at, and they get trapped in a hospital. So that's my most recent, and I also do poetry. I have 2 poetry books that are out. So I kind of do a few different things in the writing sphere.
So what I try to steer clear of because you've done other podcast interviews before, I assume, correct?
I have, yes.
Okay. So I want to try to steer clear of because if I want to say, so what made you become a writer? I can say, hey, please refer to Luna's other podcasts. And
Yeah.
I'm sure Luna's mentioned this on probably at least 1 or 2 of those. So
Yeah, quite a few of them, maybe a half a dozen.
yeah, it's kind of the way it goes. And so, I mean, because okay, so for writing, so I end up talking about this on all the creative endeavors,
Yeah.
because I know that they're they got me, man, all of them, and they've all bested me. Um, where are you with the AI Chat GPT? If that's because I've everything I've done, like I create a lot of different things, and even the show, I can say, screw it, I can let AI do it better. AI, they just did a thing with Google. Google can now be clever, AI clever, which is something that they thought wasn't going to happen for a long time, but now AI can be clever. So where
Yeah.
are you with all that? How old are you? Like in your 20s?
I'm 30.
30? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
So where are you with all this?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of interesting tech that is out there. Personally, as an artist and creative, I think that humans should be making art and writing stuff, and I think it feels a bit I guess not to sound like a middle schooler, but it feels kind of icky when I see a lot of things that are created with AI. So yeah, I think for me personally, I don't really use, I mean, I've never used it for any creative thing. I've like dabbled with it, like I've looked at like a chat GPT type thing, or like a something, and I'll like type in a thing and I get a response, and that's about all I know for AI.
Okay,
But
all
I
right.
definitely know that there are, certainly writers out there, and definitely designers who utilize it, and I think they have been rightfully shamed for, especially for not disclosing that information. I think a lot of it's kind of, under the covers that they are using it. But I mean, for me, I'll never use it. Like, that's just something I'll never really use. And I think for others, they can make that decision. I don't think I would ever purchase a book that was like purely AI generated.
How can you
I
tell?
definitely think there are avenues where it can be used in a cool and unique way, but I haven't seen that firsthand yet. So
how are people being able to figure out if it's AI written?
I think there are telltale signs. Since a lot of the AI stuff is generated from learning, it uses a lot of the same similar language to other creators. So I know that there was a project, I believe, that got canceled that I learned about on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, that was basically feeding books into an AI system, and it was being able to like capture all this information, and then the thought was that they could spew out either books, or they could give you all of this kind of metadata that you could use to do your own writing. So I think that I think it's harder to see when it's writing, because they are so advanced now. I think there are obviously some aspects of it that are not advanced that get caught up, and that's kind of easy to see. Definitely with more of the like book cover designs, I think that's more easy to spot when it has like 6 fingers, or
Right? Yeah,
has, an extra
it's always
eye or
always the
something.
fingers.
Yeah, so and you can tell it just doesn't. Sometimes I personally feel like you can tell it doesn't have that human touch sometimes. But I mean, again, as it gets more advanced, who knows where it's going to go from here.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I can't draw at all. That's one part of art that is far, far, far removed from myself. And yeah, I mean, it's just so easy to, I don't know, because like, for instance, I always say, like, for music, like, I can take a week making one track,
Yeah,
but then now I can make a track that's better than mine in 30 seconds. And it's frustrating. It's
yeah,
frustrating as all hell. And I mean, same with writing. I wanted to I had it write me a funny kids book about teaching kids not to piss in a pool.
yeah,
And man, like, it was but then I fed it like my writing and got it to get my kind of voice, which is another thing that it does. And but then I don't know what it's stealing from. And then it's hard. And then, but I'm like, I don't want to publish it because, like, I didn't. I just came up with a goofy ass idea. I didn't come up with any of the words. Like, I mean, I'm like, I'm half analog, half digital world here. I'm
sure.
40 years old. Like, I grew up before
Yeah,
all this stuff was out, but then I also used all this stuff. And man, I don't know. I can't, but then like for SEO shit or marketing or writing a business plan, man, like eh, just even doing that, man, like is a huge help. And I don't know, man. I'm back and forth, and I like hearing what everyone has to say because everyone has kind of a
Yeah.
different take on it. Kind of the whole spectrum of what they feel about AI, and where it's going, what they feel is right with them, and right with others. And um I mean, so like if you're out and about, you're out, what's a place you find yourself coming up with ideas for either a part of your story or something, a poem? Is it usually one kind of type of place, or is it kind of all over?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think a lot of the times, it I'm really random, so I most of the time I will write down a line or an image or some kind of detail into my phone, my notes app, and then I will let that kind of simmer for however long. Um, and I get those, a lot of times I take a lot of walks. I have two dogs, so I spend a lot of time outside walking them. So I'll get that. I don't I don't like have a place where I like go to for inspiration. I know a lot of people who like go to coffee shops or go to, a specific park or, something like that. I don't really do that. I struggle to write in a environment such as that. So I think most of the time I'm catching things throughout the day, that are um that sound interesting or like have a interesting, picture to them, and then I will take that and incorporate it into whatever I'm working on. Because generally, my process is that I pick a topic or something for, especially my poetry books. I will, take a topic. So my first book was on gun violence and masculinity. So I focused all of my writing for like 2 years just on that topic, and I kind of funneled in all of my writing into that.
What kind of state did that put you in?
um, yeah, that was definitely my most difficult book that I've written so far. It had a lot to do with, you know, I think there was a lot of fear. I started writing that, I think 2015, and it came out in 2020. So there's a lot of, the Pulse nightclub shooting happened. Obviously, there's hundreds of shootings that happened. And I was very deep into that, tracking, there are websites that track mass shootings and give you all this information. And I was living that day to day for, like I said, like 4 or 5 years.
You're
And
going on to this website every day, in a way, hoping that there's more data, in a fucked up way to say it.
um,
Um,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
yeah,
I think so. I think it was more so, it wasn't every single day where I was going on there, but yeah, I mean, I would check it at least weekly, at least, a couple times a week, to see what had been happening, what was in the news, because a lot of these things, I mean, it's so common, it doesn't get onto, the
sure.
news a lot of the times, um, but I had a it blends a lot of things with like my family and especially my brother, and gun culture and hunting culture, with the mass shooting, and to kind of get to the point of, um, I think it was, it's a very difficult subject to broach, and I think that there's a lot of empathy that needs to be had with people who are, staunchly for guns or against guns. I think there's a lot of conversation to be had there.
There's a lot of conversation needs to happen about a lot of things.
Yeah, definitely. I
Even
think
if it's
that-
uncomfortable, it needs to happen.
Yeah, no, certainly I agree with that. I think that one, that one hit home to me because I had so much fear of things happening with my family because of guns involved in my family. So like that one was very difficult to, I was so looking for all of these angles, all of these things and connecting them back to that main topic. And then my second book was all about queerness and it was very happy. So it was a nice transition for me. So I wrote all about that. And then with the patient routine, that was purely focused on, health anxiety, hospital stuff, horror. So everything was, dark again, but, more focused on the horrors that I could put the character into as opposed to me, which was a nice break from a lot of my writing, which is very, I guess, self-centered or, focused on the self. It was nice to be able to put that onto another character and have them live their own life and have their own challenges.
So with your character, I have a question. So
Yeah,
so one of the guys let's see, the guy that trained me with like promos and character development and all that shit, he told me the way that you know your character is if your character goes into, let's say, a McDonald's or some other fast food joint and they screw up his order, you can say what that character would do and how that character would react at that point. And then that's kind of when you know your character, because once you know that, you can put that into any situation of how your character was going to act.
totally.
And so was the character then like loosely based off you, or was it easier to come up with that way, or was it did you try to separate it kind of partially or fully, or what kind of went with that?
Yeah, so Ashton definitely started out as a fill-in for me as I was writing a lot of health anxiety stuff. I suffer from hypochondria and a lot of related illnesses. OCD comes up a lot in it too. So the character definitely started as a fill-in for me, and as the story progressed, they definitely took on their own personality and they took on their own flaws, their own tics, their own everything. Where at the end of it, I definitely don't see myself in it anymore, besides that they are also a non-binary person. That's kind of where it ends. So I mean, overall, I think that Ashton has become I think they fit this story, and they were, I don't want to say like created specifically to be tortured, but I think that comes up a lot in why some of the thing, like I'm using some of the more challenging dark elements of what I've experienced and putting that on them and seeing how that would go about, because I know a lot of the things that happen towards the end of the book are definitely not things that I would do, but they're definitely things that I've thought of, like things that I've, intrusive thoughts, or things that I've heard from experience for other people who suffer from similar things, or vice versa. So I think that I guess at this point they're totally different people now, me and Ashton, but they came from the same core of that fear of the body and illness and diseases.
Where'd you come up with the name Ashton?
Yeah. I think it was just a random, Google search or something like that, or I think I might have used it for another book previously that has been since scrapped. But they went through a couple of iterations before I landed on Ashton. I think their name was Robin at one point. But I think Ashton kind of fulfilled that. It was supposed to be a kind of gender neutral name, and that fulfilled its purpose.
Sure. And then, so are you like you or your family? Are you guys from like somewhere, Illinois, Wisconsin, or something like that?
I'm from Minnesota, yeah.
Minnesota. All right.
Yes.
Okay. We're in Minnesota.
I'm right in the Twin Cities. Whole,
Okay. Cool.
yeah.
I lived in Bloomington,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
over on the Eden Prairie side. I was yeah, man. I liked it there. And then yeah, I moved down to Austin, Minnesota.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
not Texas. You have to specify that later on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. For
I
some people, yeah.
lived right next to the Spam Museum. It was a 5-minute walk to the Spam Museum.
Wonderful. I
Yeah.
have never been there. I have family who, I don't know if it's ironically or not, but they love that place.
It's wild, man. Like I don't know. I was blown away. I thought it would just, and it's free. I thought it would just be this crappy little like, oh, the Spam Museum. Like, what's this? But I
Yeah.
don't know. It
They
was cool.
they take that seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole town, man. They're either there or they either work there or the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so okay, so you're up in the Twin Cities, and so man, then I end up talking about Hy-Vee, uh
Yep.
talking about the grocery store, and have you, okay, another question. Have you been out to Paisley Park? Have you had any sort of stuff with that, with where Prince did his stuff?
Yeah,
It's
so I've been to it after he died. It was a super brief visit, like just on the outside. I didn't go in, and that's kind of the extent of it. I definitely remember the day he died. Like that was a very very traumatic big event in Minnesota.
sure.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
closed down everything, put all the flags at half mast, and
Yeah, I know. I was working at a nonprofit at the time, and I had gotten off at noon, and that was right when the news broke. And I was checking one of the news sites right before I left, and I remember like telling the office, I was like, Prince died, and nobody believed me. It was
sure.
pure denial,
Oh,
and then on the whole way home, NPR was playing just Prince music 24/7. I remember that was a very somber drive home that day.
yeah. I felt most of the radio stations there, like I could almost always go through the radio stations, and by the time I get back around, there's some Prince song playing, and
Yeah, it's true. We love our Prince.
yeah. And yeah, there was a thing maybe a year ago on channel 11 there. I think it's KARE. But they were going through some of their old clips, and there was some like school, I don't know, some school funding thing from back in like, the 70s or something.
Okay.
And they're looking at this footage, and like 11-year-old Prince is in it.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and so like they did a whole thing on the news. Yeah, and like they brought his friend on to, confirm, because they called him something else. I forgot what the name was. It was some, I don't know, whatever. It wasn't Prince, but
Yeah.
whatever they called him before that. But so then what was the nonprofit you were working for? What was that?
It was the Epilepsy Foundation of Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you doing there?
I was in their donation department. Just they do a lot of like street pickups where they pick up like old clothing, kind of like Savers and the veterans.
Okay.
So I was working in
Yeah.
the department, helping with logistics and such.
And so you left that.
I did.
I take it. Yeah,
Yes.
somewhere
Yep.
in there. And um, so then, so most of your work, are you work from home?
I do work from home. Yeah, my day job, I work as an editor at a publishing company. So yeah, I do work from home. Um, and I've been there since the Epilepsy Foundation, actually. So I've had just one consistent day job for the last 6 years or so.
Not a bad deal. Yeah, just having
Yeah.
one job. That's gotta be nice. And so then you still have the ability to, whenever something comes up. And so you said you use your phone for your ideas. Do you carry around a notebook or a legal pad or a, you know, uh, stone and chisel or anything like that?
Yeah. So not anymore. I don't. Especially because I'm home a lot of the times. I have access to everything. So I have a notebook on my desk that I actually mainly draw in at this point. So I'll draw pictures or something so I can remember it, especially when I'm working on like a fiction piece, if I want to like remember what the room looks like or something, so I can keep that going. Actually, I was working at that nonprofit when I was writing my first book, and I did write. They had all these like old prints, like old printed paper that they were gonna throw away, like recycle. So I would take
Yeah.
those and write on them while I was there because I couldn't go on my phone or I didn't have a computer, because I was working. So I would write on those and then I would take them home and it would serve the same purpose. So I'd have all these tons and tons of scraps of little half pages with nonsense on them half the time, and then that would translate to the poems that eventually went into that book. I've since not done that for any of the books since then because they've all been written with the Notes app and Word and all digital at this point.
Did you keep those around? Did you keep those old pieces of paper?
Yeah, I think I have a few. I think there's a few that I kept, but most of them, especially ones that I was like, oh, this isn't gonna work. I
Yeah.
had eventually recycled those. But yeah, I have a few left over of like the poems that were very critical to the collection.
So are you thinking at some point you're gonna use those, like be able to recycle them and put them into a book, just like kind of raw? Like you take like the piece of paper. Like there was a guy I was talking to, he was uh in some sort of hostage thing for a few years, and he sent a letter, like over 100 letters or something, to his wife and family. And that's what ended up becoming his book. Just like,
Oh, cool.
but he didn't do it like, I was like, like his rewrote it. I was like, that I think that would have been cool to go and just take those letters and just kind of pop them on there. But I think I had to write some stuff in code because the
Hmm.
guards or whatever, trying to
Yeah.
get it past the guards. And for some reason the guards let him send letters, but I don't know. It's, everyone has a story in a book.
Yeah.
Like you never know. I don't know how much is fiction, how much is not. And um so then, but I mean, yeah, would that be something you'd be
Yeah.
interested in? Because
I think that'd be really cool if, 2 decades from now, if I have a collected work where they put all my best stuff in one book, having that in there, that would be super cool.
yeah,
Unfortunately, I am a very poor handwriter, so my
even better.
legibility is I don't know if it would be actually be able to be read by anybody outside of me.
Might be
Um,
like a magic eye thing, and only some people will see some stuff of
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Mine's
so
terrible too.
they can see a few words here and there with just a bunch of lines everywhere else.
Yeah.
I knew what I was talking about, and it made a book, so hey, it
Right.
worked.
And so when you were writing the book, then was it? Did you do it like do you do an outline, or did you do it Stephen King and like sniff cocaine for a few days and just stay up and just write it all through, not knowing where you're going to get to, and just sort of get somewhere and be like, okay, there's my book? Or was it very methodically thought out and you just kind of filled in the blanks? Maybe
Yeah,
minus the
so
cocaine, but I
yeah,
don't want
yeah,
to.
no, yeah, no cocaine for these books at least, you know, who
Yeah,
knows about the future. You
right. Yeah.
know? But no, for the patient routine, which is the one that is fiction and actually has a through story. I had written the beginning and I wrote the ending, and I knew I wanted to get to that place. So I had to figure out how to get Ashton from, A to B. And through that, I did write, I just do a timeline where it's just, a bullet list basically of like, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens. And then I'll do like, and it should feel sad, or it should,
Right.
be scary, or whatever the feeling that goes with it. I'll put those notes in there too. So yeah, so like I have a timeline of everything, and it was never touched after actually I started typing the words, because I would just reference it, and then I would let that I would let that change if it needed. There's definitely a few scenes in there where it was like, oh, that doesn't work now that I know the book better. So I would let it naturally change if it needed to, but I did keep that beginning place and that ending place pretty solid throughout the entire process, even when other things were changing, and I was like, okay, I still need to get back to that ending.
Right.
And since then, I've kind of followed that same format. I've written a couple other books that are in the editing, revising stage. And I've kind of kept that same process of having a very loose timeline. Sometimes it's, for the patient routine, I had it pretty down where it was like nearly every single thing that Ashton did or like happened to them was like written down. And I wrote another book that hopefully will become my first novel, like full length novel one day. And that was very, it had like 8 bullet points, and I was like, I need to, this happens, and it gets to there. But there's so much in between that I was coming up with on the spot and still need to kind of flesh out. And then for the poetry collections, those really are just, I go in, I write as many poems as I can about a topic. I put them all in a book and I see where they fit in. What, I like to think that, especially my first book, the one about gun violence, does have a bit of a arch, a story arc to it. But I think overall, that's really just putting in the best work that you can do and putting that out there. So that one doesn't need like a timeline, but I definitely write, I write, like topics. So like, I know, like I was talking about, like this one's about mass shooting. How many do I have about like directly about mass shooting? How many do I have about my father? How many do I have about nature? How many do I have, I was making sure I wasn't overdoing any one specific topic in the grand scheme of the larger topic.
Yeah. And so then are you self-publishing, or you have a publisher, or
Yeah, no, I have a publisher. All of my books have been through publishers. Yeah.
so like what do you get when you're about on, how you feel when you're like on revision 4 or 5? Where's your head at then?
So so with the patient routine in particular, I definitely went through a lot of changes. So it's also a novella in verse, so it's written in poetic lines, it's not in paragraphs.
Cool.
And that was a huge thing. I had a lot of publishers who were like, this is a cool story and we like it, but like this isn't gonna sell. So
Not for you. Yep. They
and
don't
I
get
finally
you.
got one, Bridges Gate Press, who were my publisher for that. They're fantastic. They believed in it. And
Cool.
so I had many versions of it because I was trying to get it published. So I had a version that was, in paragraphs, and I had a version that was kind of a mix of both. And I told them, I was like, hey, if you want it to be one way, like I'm cool. Like I was like, I want to get this published.
Yeah.
So it went through a lot of revisions, and I had several, after we decided to be like, yes, let's just do it in verse. I had a lot of, tweaking of like, okay, how do I make this still feel very poetic while maintaining the story? Because it doesn't, you have to cut out a whole lot when you don't have 40,000, 50,000 words and you're working with significantly less words. So I think when it got down to that point where I was like cutting a lot, it was very challenging to really be like, all right, well, how do I accurately get across what the hell is happening while still being beautifully written and poetic. So I think it was a lot of just, it's a little stressful when you get to that point where you're you've gone through it a ton of times, and then I think you get to a point, at least I do, and this has gotten to all of them. I just have another book that comes out next year that I just sent my final edits to. I think it gets to the point where you're kind of disconnected from the work, where you're just like, yep, that's not even mine anymore. Like that's just, it's out in the ether. I've looked at it, 20, 30, 40 times, like in total. It's just, it is what it is. So I kind of gets to the point where they're like, hey, can we, remove this one thing or change this one thing? And you're like, yeah, go ahead. Like that makes sense
Let's
to
just
me at
end
this
it.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you said you had a couple of dogs. What are your dogs' names?
Yes, they are. My older dog, he's 5. He's a beagle, and his name is Yoshi. And my younger dog is 1. She's just a pup, and her name is Sylvie.
Yoshi and Sylvie. Okay. So when you're
Yes.
taking Yoshi and Sylvie out, I don't, they can't hear me, right?
Oh, they can. They're right here.
Okay. So when
But that's
you're,
fine. They're trained.
you're taking them out for a, you know what I'm saying? Where you're
Yes.
doing this with them.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I don't want to get,
understand.
I can't even spell it out because dogs,
Oh,
they
know
know
that.
that one too.
They definitely know that
Yeah.
spelled out, said weirdly. They know it all.
Yeah. So then when you're out doing that, I mean, are they ever part of the inspiration of those stories, or are they so you're like, hey, yo, dogs, hold up a minute, I got an idea, or do you ever start writing in your notes app and then trip over the sidewalk or something, or what's
Yeah. Yeah. Since I do spend a lot of time walking them, and that's kind of my primary
just the best?
yeah, I definitely think that they inspire things. I think they we have a ton of woods by my home, and I think that helps it because they're very observant of what's happening in those woods, and nature comes into play a lot in my writing. So I like to watch them and see what they're doing, and that plays into some of the imagery and things that happen in my writing. One of the books I've been writing was about a national park, so a lot of we go walk past the woods, and I would use a lot of that, what they're the bird coming out, or what's on the woods, what are on the trees, etc. So I think they definitely help in that. But yeah, I definitely get caught, being like, all right, when you stop, I need to write this down. Like I'm gonna forget this one. Most of the time I'm pretty good,
Yeah.
where I'll just keep saying it in my head, where I'll get a sentence or whatever, and I'll just say it in my head until I can write it down. But sometimes I definitely have to stop them and be like, all right, take a pause, sit, and I gotta write this down quick.
That's impressive. You can keep saying that and remember it. If I try that, if I tell myself, oh yeah, I'll just keep saying I'll remember it. 5 minutes, no, not in 5 minutes, probably a minute later, it's gone. If I don't write it down.
Yeah, I had to do that a lot during when I was in college, when I would get something like at the beginning of a class that was like a 2-hour class, and I didn't have an option to write it down because we were doing a lab or, whatever it is. And I just trained myself to keep saying it over and over again. And, 80% of the time it stuck with me, sometimes you definitely forget where you're just like, shit, that's gone. That
Yep.
might have been my best sentence ever and it's gone.
It's
But
gone.
what can you do?
Right. And so then do you, with your notes app, that was something that I found, even with writing the notebook, how often do you go back over and look at the stuff? Or do you, because I had stuff I would write down that I never look at again. And it's like, why did I even do that? Like, do you go back and, or do you have like one list of notes, or do you have like different notes for different subjects or stories or poems or?
Yeah. So I have kind of what I do is any fiction book that I'm writing, I have one like note for it, and I typically have that pinned at the top of my notes app. And then poetry, I just kind of write down lines in one big thing, and once I incorporate that into a poem, I'll get rid of it. So I'm looking at that pretty consistently. I like to sit down at least once a month to kind of sit down and be like, all right, is there anything in here that I can use? And then I'll, a lot of the times I'll read the note and it'll be, not good. So I'll just
What does
delete
this
any.
mean?
Yeah, I'll be like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So especially ones that get written like when I wake up or like in the middle of the
Yeah.
night. Those ones are either very genius or very, very, very incoherent.
I think there was a Seinfeld or Curb Your Enthusiasm episode about that, and just going and like asking everybody, like, what do you think this means? I wrote it down. I don't.
Yeah, it
I don't
definitely
know,
has that feel sometimes.
And so then, I mean, so you're waking up, you're thinking about this, you're in bed about to fall asleep, still thinking about this. I mean, it doesn't stop, right? It just keeps, it's just always there, or is there a time
Yeah.
when you have to, are you able to force it to stop, or do you want to get to a point in your day when you want it to force a stop and not think about it?
Yeah, so I definitely, if I'm very consciously resting, I can turn it off pretty well. But for the
Nice.
most part, I keep it, I keep thinking and I keep working pretty much 24/7 on, and writing stuff, trying to make sure that I'm always finding new things to talk about, finding new ways to say things. So yeah, I mean, it's when I wake up to when I go to bed, I'm always trying to think of things. And but like I said, yeah, I can definitely turn it off if need be. I just don't most of the time.
Because might come up with a good idea then. Never know. And so I mean, so where's your work available? Is it Amazon? Is it in bookstores, libraries,
Yeah, definitely.
gym down the corner?
No gyms that I know of yet, though I'm
Okay.
sure someone named Jim probably has one. Yeah, no, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookshop, Books A Million, all the online realtors. It's in several local bookstores throughout the United States. I know there are a few in Australia that have it, a few in Europe that have it.
Hot dog.
Yeah, so it's pretty much everywhere. I know that, I always like to tell people, if you are unable to support, you can always go to your local library and request it be held there, because that also is super tremendously helpful, and
So-
doesn't cost you anything.
So what happens there? Because that was something I was asking someone earlier about that, and kind of looked at me like I was crazy or something, asking about if it's at a library. But so like, so if I went to my library and I said, hey, I want one of Luna's books, what's the process then in that? Do they like, does the library go like, oh, okay, I know Luna, but how do I get a hold of Luna? Do I get a hold of Luna, the publisher? And then what happens? And then how do they get the book?
Yeah, so I can speak for kind of the one that I know. I've requested a few books at my local library, and the process is really simple. You know, you submit, you say, hey, I want this book to be held here. Sometimes, from what I understand, sometimes they get denied because there are too many of XYZ book, but most of the time they get approved. They'll go and purchase the book from either the publisher or the distributor, and then it's in the library. It's generally a pretty easy process for most of them. From what I've seen, they have online forms where you just, you know, provide the name, the author, and the ISBN, which is the code on the back, and it's pretty simple. And then you'll hear back from them in however long it takes them. I think mine is a few days, and they were like, cool, it's approved, we purchased it, it should be in the store or in the library, and I think it was like a week.
That's killer. And so then where can people find you elsewhere if they want to find you, either online or like so you can find your book, or if they want to find you, hopefully not in a back alley or something, you know,
Yeah.
wherever they want to find you.
Yeah, definitely. I have a website, lunareyhall.com. It has all of my published materials on there, all of my books on there. It has an events calendar. I do readings. I try to do readings as often as I can. You can also purchase signed copies of my books on the website. And I'm also on pretty much every social media website at Luna Rey Hall. Same thing, Twitter, Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. If it exists, I'm probably there.
What do you do on TikTok?
TikTok, I do a lot of I put my poems out on there, either performing them or having all, you know, text-based things with music in the background, or I'll be on camera performing. I also did a series of videos for the patient routine that was kind of leading up to it with that was kind of like how do you call it, promotional videos for the hospital that the book takes place in, I guess. So it was kind of riffing on that.
Cool.
So I do a variety of things on there.
Awesome. Well, hey, well, Luna, awesome talking with you. Not knowing what we're gonna get to, what we're gonna talk about it. But we got something pretty cool. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, definitely.
So
thank you so much for having me.
yeah, I very much appreciate you being here and enjoyed it. And so yeah, have a awesome rest of your day. If you ever do go back over to Paisley Park, I would recommend it. It's cool in the fact that when you go in and when you walk inside, you have to give your phone up or your camera up, and
Oh,
they put it in
sure.
a locked thing. So nobody in there you're not going to have someone standing in front of a platinum record while you're
Yeah.
trying to look at it,
Yeah.
doing
For
this
sure.
or something.
Yeah.
And man, it's a cool place. If you ever get a chance, I would recommend that one. I'm not big on tourist attractions, but that was something that was pretty darn neat. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, it's always been something I wanted to get into. It just was never, the cards were never right.
take a trip out to Chanhassen.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's not too far. So
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, well, yeah, have an awesome rest of your day, man. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
all right, thank you so much.
All right. You bet. Uh, yep. And I didn't, I don't know. I didn't, I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening, you guys. I didn't mean to say man, but it's just something I say. So, sorry, Yeah. So you guys, thanks for listening. Appreciate everyone listening. And that is the show. Man. Boom.
It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker. It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker.
Ernest! Ernest! Ernest!
Yes, Pee-wee.
You brought the snacks, right?